Popular Superstitions, written for the American Sunday School Union and revised by the Committee of Publication. Entered according to the Act of Congress in the year 1832 by Paul Beck, Jr., in trust for the American Sunday School Union. Everybody knows how strong our early impressions are. Some have said that all minds are at first alike, and that the difference which appears in later life arises wholly from the difference in early education. Whatever may be thought of this opinion, no one will deny that the impressions and associations of childhood have much to do in forming the character. Everyone who observes the observations of his own mind is able, in some instances, to trace what is peculiar in his character to some incident or association of his early years. These impressions are not at all governed by reason or judgment, but generally by a power of association. Indeed, they are frequently found directly opposed to reason, and rule the mind, in spite of all efforts to conquer them. How many foolish aversions may be traced to this cause? Some persons, for example, having so strong an aversion to a cat that they are almost thrown into convulsions by the sight of one. Others feel the same way towards spiders, beetles, and grasshoppers. These things are less surprising when we see them in weak or ignorant persons, but they sometimes appear in persons of good education and strong mind, who, we should think, would be more likely to ridicule the weakness than to be overcome by it. No man, says a late writer on the power of association, ever gave more decided proof of courage than the celebrated Marquis de la Roche-Jagelaine. But it is a singular fact, although no account is given of the origin of such strange association, that he could not look in the face of a squirrel without trembling and turning pale. He knew his weaknesses in this respect, but with all his efforts, he could not prevent such effects whenever he was in the presence of that harmless and timid little animal. The manner in which such associations are formed is easily explained. Miss Hamilton, a sensible and judicious writer on education, accounts for it thusly. She supposes a child to see a frog for the first time in company with a person who has no aversion to frogs, who praises the beauty of their skin, admires their agility, and mentions their inoffensiveness with sympathy and compassion. The child will be delighted with the appearance of the frog, and think no more of terror or disgust than if it were Robin Redbreast. But change the circumstances, and let him, when he first sees a frog, hear a shriek of terror from his mother or nurse. Let him see her run from it with trembling, and hear her mention it with horror, and it is probable the associations thus formed will remain for life. While sitting in an alcove of a friend's garden last summer, I saw a darling little girl whose mind had been happily preserved from the dominion of prejudice, busily employed in collecting pebbles, and, as I supposed, putting them in her frock as she gathered them up. Observing me, she came running toward me with a joyful countenance. "See," cried she, "see what manner of beautiful creatures I have got here," emptying at the same time the contents of her lap into mine. The prize was nothing less than a number of large black beetles. I confess I could have dispensed with the gift, nor could I behold the harmless creatures crawling upon me without shuddering. I had, however, resolution enough to conceal my sensations. After thanking my little friend for her kindness, begged she would replace them in her frock, that she might put them down where she found them, so they might find their way back to their families. Delighted with the employment in which I could not prevail on myself to assist, she soon took away my disagreeable companions, and while I watched the expression of her animated countenance, I could not help reflecting how much I suffered needlessly from early associations. As aversion to black beetles, it is true, will not often interfere with our happiness or with the comfort of others, why, in any instance, should the mind be filled by such vain and foolish prejudices? The power of such associations is also seen in the groundless fears many persons have on other subjects. Some are so affected by the fear of thunder and lightning that the mere apprehension of a storm is sufficient to occasion the most violent terror. The author is acquainted with a family in which the parents always take refuge under a feather bed when a storm approaches. As might be expected, this terror has been communicated to the children, who will probably feel and suffer from its effect through life. But the worst result of such associations is seen in their superstitious fears, which are so prevalent, even in the present enlightened age. It was a remark of the late President Dwight that few persons, however distinguished for strength of mind or literary attainments, are able wholly to conquer the superstitious fears indulged in early life. The truth of this remark is abundantly evident from facts. A Chief Justice in the state of New York once said, "I have no faith in signs, but yet I always feel unpleasantly if I find a pin with the point toward me." And another gentleman of cultivated mind and elevated station says, "A belief in signs is perfectly ridiculous, yet I cannot for the life of me see the new moon over my left shoulder without an uneasy sensation." How many persons are affected by the most gloomy apprehensions in the howling of a dog or the ticking of a death watch? How many would shrink from passing through a graveyard at midnight, or watching alone by night with a corpse? How many are accustomed to associate feelings of terror with darkness, and so that the mere fact of going into a dark cellar or closet or being left alone in a dark room for a few minutes would occasion very disagreeable feelings? Such being the effects of early impressions, how important it is that these impressions should be of a salutary nature, and that conviction of a superintending providence should be implanted in the mind at the earliest period. In those who have been from childhood accustomed to the indulgence of superstitious fears, a complete cure is not possible. The diffusion of knowledge will, however, do much toward it. As more light prevails, and people generally become better acquainted with the laws of nature, these vain apprehensions, which arise mostly from ignorance and superstition, will gradually disappear. But nothing will tend so powerfully to remove them as habitual trust in the wisdom and goodness of God, who rules over all. It will therefore be my object in this work to state such facts as to make such remarks as may throw light upon the origin, and consequently expose, the folly of superstitious fears, and particularly to deepen the conviction in the mind of the reader that all events, the smallest as well as the greatest, occur under the direction of an almighty power, who orders all things according to the counsel of his own will.